Three ancient civilizations, separated by thousands of kilometers, by different languages, by different gods, by different calendars, and by alphabets that none of the others could read. The Hebrews wrote on clay and papyrus. The Sumerians carved their records on clay tablets with cuneiform script, and the Ethiopians preserved in their sacred texts what the rest of the world chose to destroy. None of these civilizations communicated with one another during the centuries in which they produced these records. None shared translators, ambassadors, or traders who could have carried a history from one world to another. Each developed independently, in different corners of the ancient world, without a common source that historians have been able to identify. And yet they all documented the same beings, the same physical characteristics, the same actions, the same forbidden knowledge transmitted to humanity, the same catastrophic consequences, the same divine judgment by water. The Hebrews called them the Nephilim, the Watchers, the Ben Elohim. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, and the connection between these names is not a linguistic or mythological coincidence. It is the convergence of three independent historical records that point to the same reality. What you are about to hear is not speculation. It is a comparison of documented ancient texts that scholars have been examining separately for centuries, and that almost no one has put side by side into a coherent and complete narrative. Three names, one race, and one truth that was buried in three different languages at the same time. The oldest document in this story is not in the Bible. It's on the clay tablets that archaeologists unearthed in the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, the region we now call Iraq, in the mid-19th century. Thousands of clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform script, the oldest known form of writing. Some of these tablets date back more than 5,000 years. And on those tablets, the Sumerians recorded the existence of beings they called the Anunnaki. The Sumerian word Anunnaki is composed of three elements: En meaning sky, Un indicating origin or place of origin, and Ki meaning earth. Those who came from the sky to earth. Not as a poetic figure, nor as the name of a tribe, but as a technical description of their nature and origin. Beings who descended from the sky, who crossed a border between two worlds, who came to earth with a purpose that Sumerian texts describe with disturbing precision. Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki as beings of superhuman stature with intelligence superior to that of humans. They are consistently depicted as tall, luminous figures with features that visually distinguish them from ordinary human beings. They possessed authority over humankind, knowledge that humans did not have, and a capacity to intervene in human affairs that the texts themselves describe as absolute. The Epic of Atrahasis, one of the oldest Sumerian texts on the origin of humanity, records that the Anunnaki descended to earth and settled among humans. It also states that their presence brought about consequences that humanity could not control on its own. Now open Genesis chapter 6 verse 2. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, and saw that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves from among all whom they chose. In Hebrew, the sons of God are the Ben Elohim. Ben means sons. Elohim is the name of God in its most powerful and plural form, not a poetic metaphor for religious men, not descendants of the lineage of Seth. The same expression appears in Job chapter 1 verse 6, Job chapter 2 verse 1, and Job chapter 38 verse 7, and in every case without exception, it refers to angelic beings who appeared directly before the throne of God, beings from the sky, who crossed a border, who descended to earth. The Sumerians called them Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth. The Hebrews called them Ben Elohim, the sons of God. Same description, same origin, same action. Two languages, two civilizations, two completely different geographies. But there is a third name, and this one comes from the text that the Western canon excluded 15 centuries ago. The Book of Enoch, preserved for centuries in the Ethiopian Bible and confirmed by fragments found among the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947, calls them the Watchers. In Aramaic, the language in which part of that book was written, the word is Iyr. Those who watch, those who observe, those who do not sleep. The Book of Enoch 6:1-2 records that in those days when the sons of men had multiplied, beautiful and pleasing daughters were born. And the angels, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, Let us go and choose wives for ourselves from among the sons of men. Vigilantes, Ben Elohim, Anunnaki, three names, three languages, three civilizations that were unaware of each other, one in ancient Aramaic, one in Hebrew. one in Sumerian that is 5,000 years old, all describing the same border crossing, the same descent from the sky, the same arrival on Earth with consequences that no human being could foresee or control. Now examine what each of these records says those beings did after they descended. Sumerian texts describe how the Anunnaki transmitted to humanity knowledge that humans had not discovered on their own. Advanced agriculture, monumental architecture, writing, systems for measuring time and space, and knowledge of celestial cycles. The Sumerian catalog of what the Anunnaki taught covers precisely the areas in which human civilization made its most inexplicable and unexpected leaps. Now open the Book of Enoch, chapter 8. Azazel, one of the Watcher's leaders, taught men how to forge swords, knives, shields, and armor from metal. The technology of war was transmitted directly from a supernatural being to a humanity that had not discovered it on its own. And he taught women the art of ornamentation, the use of antimony for their eyes, the adornment of precious metals, and beautification techniques that had never before existed in the human world. Semyaza taught enchantments and the art of roots. Barakiel taught astrology. Kokabel taught the reading of star patterns. Arakiel taught the secrets of the earth. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. Sariel taught the course of the moon. The catalog in the Book of Enoch and the Sumerian catalog of the gifts of the Anunnaki describe exactly the same categories of knowledge. The technology of war, astronomical knowledge, the secrets of the earth, the arts of beautification and seduction, celestial cycles and their use for prediction and control, same categories, same sequence, same consequence, a humanity that received advanced knowledge without the necessary moral framework to use it without destroying itself. Imagine being a human being from the antediluvian world, an ordinary man who has spent his entire life working the land with the same tools as his father and his father's father. And suddenly, over the course of a generation, your world changes in a way that no previous history could have prepared you for. Beings appear who are not like you, taller, with a presence that paralyzes those who look upon them, with knowledge that surpasses anything any human being has accumulated in the entire history of your species. And they begin to transmit that knowledge, to teach, to build, to transform the world around them with a speed that defies human explanation. Astronomical knowledge that took millennia to develop in later civilizations reached that world in a single generation. Metallurgy, enabling the manufacture of weapons with an efficiency no human warrior had ever known, appeared suddenly. The art of seduction and domination through beauty was systematized and transmitted as a science. In previous generations, the most powerful man in your region was simply the strongest, the most cunning, the one who had survived the longest. But now power had another source, an origin that ordinary human beings could neither match nor comprehend nor resist. That is what both records, Hebrew and Sumerian, describe as the result of their arrival. Now examine the offspring. Genesis chapter 6 verse 4 records that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men and had children by them. These children are described as Gaborim, the mighty ones, the champions, men of renown whose fame spread throughout the earth. The word Nephilim comes from the Hebrew root nephal, meaning to fall or descend. It is not a descriptive term for their size, but rather for their origin. They are those who fell, those who descended without permission. This is the same action described by the Sumerian Anunnaki, but from the perspective of divine judgment on that crossing of the boundary. The Book of Enoch chapter 7 records that from these unions were born giants of a stature the world had never seen before. They consumed all that men produced, using human flesh. When resources were exhausted, they turned against men themselves. They filled the earth with blood, violence, and terror for centuries. Sumerian texts also record beings of superhuman stature who ruled over humankind for extraordinarily long periods. The Sumerian king list, one of the most important archaeological documents of the ancient world, records the kings who reigned before the Great Flood, with reigns ranging from thousands to tens of thousands of years. Not as a metaphor, but as a record of power without biological expiration. Beings who ruled simply because they could without death to end their reign. Imagine being born into a world where you've been in power for 300 years. Imagine growing up, aging and dying without that ruler aging with you, without him weakening, without anyone being able to predict when his reign will end because none of his predecessors ever did. That is what both traditions document. The Hebrew record with the precise genealogy of Genesis chapter 5, which gives exact ages. The Sumerian record with the king list, which records reigns of a duration that the later world would never again witness. 2 traditions, 2 languages, the same testimony. And then came the trial. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving Sumerian epic poem, recounts a global flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity. The man who survived was named Utnapishtim. He received instructions from one of the Anunnaki. He built a massive vessel and boarded representatives of all the animals. The flood covered the earth. The vessel came to rest on a mountain. A bird was sent out to search for dry land. Genesis chapters 6-8 records a global flood sent by God to destroy corrupt humanity. The man who survived was named Noah. The instructions were given to him directly by God. He built a wooden ark of precise dimensions. He took pairs of every animal on board. The flood covered the earth. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. A dove was sent out to search for dry land. The narrative structure of both records is identical in its essential elements, not similar, identical. Critics point to these similarities as evidence that one borrowed from the other. But there is another possibility that none of these critics directly address, that both accounts are independent memories of the same real event, preserved in 2 distinct cultural traditions, with the details each preserved through its own linguistic and cultural filters. 2 civilizations that did not communicate with each other. 2 texts that describe the same event with the same fundamental structure, not because one copied the other, but because both were remembering the same catastrophe that the entire world witnessed, and that no human tradition could completely forget. But there is a crucial difference between the 2 records that reveals something the Sumerians could not understand from within their own system. Genesis records that the flood was a moral judgment. It was not an accidental catastrophe. It was not a divine whim. It was a specific response to a specific corruption caused by crossing a specific boundary that should not have been crossed. Genesis chapter 6 verses 5-6 records that the Lord saw how great the wickedness of humankind was on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. The Sumerian texts record the flood as a decision of the gods, but without the moral clarity that Genesis provides. The Sumerian text has the what, the Hebrew record has the why, and the Book of Enoch connects both things with a precision that neither document could have achieved separately. The Book of Enoch 9-1 records that the archangels Michael, Sariel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw the blood being shed on the earth, and all the wickedness being done there, and they heard the voice of those who cried out. The spirits of the souls of men made their case before the gates of heaven. The cry of humanity crushed by the Nephilim reached God, and the answer came. The letter of Jude verse 6 records that the angels who did not keep their original domain and abandoned their own dwelling place, God has kept in eternal chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4 confirms that God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them into the abyss in chains in darkness, reserved for judgment. The Sumerian texts do not record the fate of the Anunnaki after the flood with this clarity, but they do record their absence. Post-flood accounts speak of the Anunnaki as beings no longer present in the world in the same way, that they were separated, that access to them fundamentally changed after the water. The Hebrew record explains why. The Sumerian record documents the outcome without fully understanding the cause. 2 perspectives of the same event, seen from 2 different angles, and together they form an image that neither could complete on its own. But there is something more. Something that scholars of both traditions have observed for centuries without bringing them together into a single conclusion. The Book of Enoch 15:8-12 records God's words to Enoch concerning what would happen to the spirits of the Nephilim after the flood. Their physical bodies were destroyed, but their spirits were not. The spirits of the giants will oppress, corrupt, attack, fight, and cause destruction on the earth. They will not eat food, they will not thirst, and they will not be hindered by their physical senses, but they will rise up against the children of men because they came from them. Post-flood Mesopotamian texts describe a category of beings called the Galu and the Utuku, disembodied evil spirits that attack humans, seeking to inhabit physical forms and causing disease, madness, and destruction. The catalog of their actions in post-flood Sumerian texts is identical to the catalog in the Book of Enoch of the spirits of the Nephilim who remained on earth. The bodies were destroyed. The spirits remained, and both traditions record that persistent presence, one with the theological language of the Book of Enoch, and the other with the mythological language of Mesopotamian texts about demons and spirits. Imagine being an archaeologist or a theologian who spends decades studying these texts separately. Old Testament scholars read Genesis and the Book of Enoch. Assyriologists read the Sumerian and Akkadian tablets. They rarely converse with one another. They rarely place their texts side by side for the comparison the texts themselves demand. But when you do that, when you place the description of the Watchers in the Book of Enoch next to the description of the Anunnaki in the Sumerian texts, and the genealogy of Genesis next to the Sumerian king list, and the flood story in Genesis chapters 7 to 8, next to the Epic of Gilgamesh, what emerges is not a coincidence. What emerges is a convergence. Three independent sources, produced in three different languages, in three different regions of the ancient world, converge on the same point. They describe the same origin, the same actions, the same consequences, the same judgment, with different names for the same being, with different cultures for the same event, with different languages for the same reality. So why three names? The question isn't why these beings existed. The question is why different civilizations named them so differently when they were clearly describing the same thing, and the answer lies in how historical memory works across time and geography. When a civilization experiences a cosmic-scale event, an event so vast that no human being can contain it within the normal limits of language and understanding, that event becomes cultural memory. And cultural memory is not a neutral archive. It is a narrative that each culture filters through its own categories, its own gods, its own language, its own power structure. The Sumerians filtered the event through their pantheon. The beings who came from the sky were gods because in their system of understanding only gods came from the sky. They called them Anunnaki, those from heaven to earth, because that was the functional description their language could produce. The Hebrews filter the same event through their monotheistic theology. There is only one God. What came from heaven was not divine. It was angelic, and when it crossed the boundary it should not have crossed, it became fallen. They call them Ben Elohim in their original form, and they call them Nephilim, the fallen ones, in their corrupted form, because in their system of understanding the identity of a being is determined by its relationship with God. In the Book of Enoch, which operates in Aramaic and within the Hebrew prophetic tradition, calls them the Watchers, the Iyr, because it emphasizes their original function before the fall. Beings who observed, who guarded, who had access to the mysteries of the cosmic order before choosing to betray that access. Three names because three civilizations were looking at the same object from three different angles. The same being, the same action, the same judgment, the same outcome, but each culture describing what it could see from where it stood. And then there is the question that no one asks out loud in universities, but that the texts are silently answering. If these three traditions are independent records of the same event, and if that event was so massive, so universal, and so catastrophic that no human tradition anywhere in the world completely forgot it, why was it so important to God's enemy that it happened? Go back to Genesis chapter 3 verse 15. The moment immediately after the fall, before anything that happened afterward could have happened, the first prophecy recorded in all of Scripture. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. The offspring of the woman will crush your head. A seed, a specific genealogical line that had to remain intact through time to produce the being that would defeat the enemy definitively and irreversibly. The enemy heard that prophecy. He was present when it was uttered, and the response he devised was the Watcher's incursion. If the entire human race is genetically corrupted by union with supernatural beings, if the entire human genome is altered by the massive influx of non-human beings, then the promised seed cannot be born. The being whose arrival was heralded as the ultimate defeat of the enemy cannot exist, because there would be no pure humanity from which to be born. The operation was not chaotic. It was not the whim of beings who simply desired human women. It was a cosmic-scale military operation with a specific objective: to corrupt humanity's genetic lineage before the promised Savior could arrive. And Sumerian tradition records the same pattern, though without the theological clarity of Genesis. Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki intermingling with humans, creating hybrid offspring and altering the very nature of humanity in the world. They don't fully explain why, nor do they provide the framework of Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, which gives that action its complete strategic direction. Imagine finding an incomplete map of an unknown territory. One part of the map shows north and south but not east or west. Another part shows east and west but not north or south. Separately, both fragments are useful but incomplete. Together, they form the complete map. The Sumerian record contains the testimony of eyewitnesses who saw what happened from within a civilization that worshipped them as gods. The Hebrew record contains the theological interpretation that explains the meaning of what the Sumerian witnesses saw. And the Book of Enoch contains the specific details that Genesis records only in outline. None of the three is complete on its own. Together, they form an image that is greater than any of its parts. Three names because the truth was too big for a single civilization in a single language with a single system of understanding to fully contain it. And now apply this to today. Jesus of Nazareth in Matthew chapter 24 verses 37 to 39 chose the days of Noah as the precise reference point to describe the end times. Not Sodom, not Egypt, not Babylon. Noah, the most corrupt, violent, and spiritually compromised days in all of recorded human history. And he said that this would be the coming of the Son of Man. The same patterns, the same kind of corruption, the same blurring of lines that shouldn't be crossed, the same normalization of what should be recognized as a warning sign, the same widespread indifference to the warning. Advanced technology that surpasses the moral capacity of those who use it. Knowledge that arrives faster than humanity can responsibly integrate. Deliberately blurred boundaries between human and non-human. Power concentrated in the hands of those who do not age like everyone else, who do not have the same biological limitations, who are not accountable to any external authority. The forges of Azazel, passed on to a humanity without the necessary moral framework to use them without being destroyed. Not as a metaphor, as a pattern that three independent ancient traditions documented in the same way and that Jesus himself pointed to as the exact reference for the end times. There's a detail in this story that almost no one notices, a detail hidden in the names themselves, in the root of each of the three terms that the three civilizations used to describe the same beings. In Hebrew, Nephilim comes from Nephal, to fall, to descend, but Nephal in Hebrew also carries the connotation of something that failed, something that gave way, something that could not maintain what it had. The same term used for a man who falls in battle, for a person who collapses under temptation, for a wall that cannot withstand the weight placed upon it. In Aramaic, the watchers, the Iyr, bear the image of beings who watch tirelessly, who never sleep, who are always present, always attentive, always on guard. The same term that prophetic texts use to describe the sacred function of guarding and protecting, a function they chose to betray, and in Sumerian, Anunnaki, Anunnaki, those from heaven to earth. But the particle na in Sumerian, in certain contexts, implies permanence and determination. Not simply those who descended, those who decided to stay, those who crossed the border with the intention of never returning. Three names that in three different languages describe the same moment of decision with three different emphases. The Hebrew emphasis, the result. They fell. The Aramaic emphasis, what they betrayed. They were guardians. The Sumerian emphasis, action and intention. They came down to stay. One single event, three linguistic angles, three cultures that, without coordination or communication, captured three distinct dimensions of the same reality. The world today has more access to these texts than any previous generation in history. The Sumerian tablets have been digitized and are available to anyone with an internet connection. The Dead Sea Scrolls, including fragments of the Book of Enoch, are accessible in public academic databases. The text of the Ethiopian Bible, which preserved the complete Book of Enoch while the rest of the world destroyed it, has been translated into dozens of languages. Never before in the history of humankind has it been so easy to place these three records side by side and see what they say together. And what they say together is that there was a supernatural intervention in human history. An intervention that three independent civilizations documented from three different perspectives. An intervention that changed the world so profoundly that it triggered a global judgment. An intervention whose effects, according to the Book of Enoch itself, did not end with the flood. And that a man 2,000 years ago pointed to that past intervention as the exact reference for what was to come. You're hearing this now for a reason. In the darkest world of recorded history, with three names in three different languages pointing to the same being, with the human genome under strategic attack, with corruption so total that God himself described it as complete, there was a man who found grace. A man whose family line had not been corrupted, whose faithfulness was enough for God to preserve the world through him. The same God who placed the testimony of what happened in 3 different languages, in 3 civilizations that did not communicate, is speaking to you through those texts right now. The question is not whether the Watchers existed. The question is not whether the Anunnaki were real. The question is not whether the Book of Enoch and the Sumerian tablets are describing the same event. The question is what you do with what you just heard. The same door that Noah crossed before God closed it from the outside remains open right now. Not because time is unlimited, but because God's patience is still active. There is still time to cross that door before it closes forever. If this opens up something you've never seen before, subscribe and keep discovering the truths the world chose to forget.